The secrets behind the Age-Regression program is about to get blown wide open. Dr. Michael Salla recently spoke with a whistleblower who claims to have worked in the secret space program. We're about to hear incredible insight from his connection, apparently with the Pleiadians, in regards to the information that has just come out on the Nature's Journal. Stand by, everybody. We've got Michael Salla, and I had the pleasure to interview him today.
Yeah, the results came out in an article that was published in the journal Nature, which is one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals, and basically it was talking about this clinical study conducted by the University of California out of Los Angeles on 9 men, where they were testing a cocktail of drugs that was based on growth hormones and anti-diabetics medications, and they were marking whether or not this would actually help them in terms of treating thyroid problems. But what they found instead, in looking at the results in terms of the genetics, the genomes, that looking at the markers in the genomes, that on average the 9 men in the studies, that their age was regressed 2.5 years, which is amazing, because that was not really what they were trying to do. That they were trying to find out if that cocktail of drugs could actually help with thyroid issues, but instead they found, accidentally, supposedly, that this age regressed the men 2.5 years. And to me, this is a sign that this is actually not a kind of accidental byproduct of a clinical study, but I think it's a kind of slow process of disclosure that scientists in the white world are being encouraged to go down the track of experimenting with different cocktails of drugs, which can actually result in this kind of age regression phenomenon that secret space program whistleblowers say that was used on them to age regress them an average of 20 years. Well, there have been a number of scientists that have been studying the possibility of age regression, and they've been testing various pharmaceutical products on rats. And the first studies came out around 3 years ago, and they thought that the first clinical studies on humans would be conducted in 5 years' time. So that was the speculation at the time, based on the studies that had produced some kind of age regression on particular organs on rats that were subjected to some kind of treatment. So now with this study that just came out in Nature, what that does is that basically it gives white world scientists a kind of heads up that this is very real, that you actually can age regress. It's just coming up with the right combination of drugs, the right cocktail that can actually produce this kind of really dramatic age regression effect. And I think the result is going to be that white world scientists that have already been working in the area of age regression are going to look at these results and see how that can be applied to the kind of scientific knowledge that they've put together so far in these earlier clinical studies on rats and age regress in particular organs, and now looking at whether or not they can actually come up with a more stable cocktail or something that is going to be feasible for releasing into the general market. So in other words, I think that white world scientists, pharmaceutical companies are being encouraged to invest resources in continuing doing clinical studies and doing trials to find out exactly what the right combination of drugs is, growth hormones and whatever else is needed to be able to produce age regression so that it can go out to the market.
So basically, whistleblowers like Corey Goode have been speaking about this age regression technology for many years now. And now that this Nature article comes out, it does basically redeem Corey Goode in his basic statements. Can you further explain the age regression progress, and is it a possible alien connection here?
Well, this study that came out that was discussed in the Nature article, basically that corroborates what Corey Goode and other insiders like William Tompkins have been saying for a few years now, since 2015, that they either directly worked on developing this kind of drug cocktail that could actually be used to age regress people who were part of this 20 and back program, that Corey Good, Michael, Ralph, and others that were part of this secret space program said that at the end of their 20-year program, a cocktail of drugs was actually used to age regress them. William Tompkins says that from 1967 to 1971, he worked at TRW as a systems engineer to help them work out exactly how to develop this cocktail of drugs for age regression. And Tompkins, importantly, he pointed out that this was something that the human-looking Nordic extraterrestrials, or many people today would describe them as Pleiadian extraterrestrials, that they actually were helping the US Navy develop this cocktail of drugs for use on secret space program participants. So this was something that was being developed in the 1960s and the 1970s by companies like TRW, and it's being used on many thousands of secret space program whistleblowers like Corey Good. And the thing is now, what we're seeing with these scientific studies that are coming out, that's corroboration that this age regression technology does work, and that it involves a cocktail of everyday drugs that many companies are now producing, but it's just coming up with the right combination, and you can actually age regress people. And this is really important because I think that this is going to be a vehicle for disclosure.
So Michael, could you tell us about this new whistleblower on the block? Basically worked within the same program as Corey Good, and they've had the same experiences and experiments done on them. Now, what does this new whistleblower have to say?
This new whistleblower that I've just begun communicating with just in the last several weeks, I mean, his testimony is really remarkable. I mean, he's a professional engineer, and he has his own company. He wishes to remain anonymous, so I can't say anything about his name or his company. But he says that in 1979, he was recruited into the secret space program that was run by the Navy. He served for 20 years, and at the end of that 20 years, he was age regressed. And he says that during the major portion of that 20-year service, he was actually on a Pleiadian mothership, along with a number of other Navy people that had been recruited for the program. And these were primarily professionals. We're talking about engineers, we're talking about medical doctors, we're talking about psychologists, engineers, scientists, and so forth, who were basically being trained in their professions from the perspective of the Pleiadian sciences. And their goal was, when they would come back into human society, eventually they would share this information. Well, he just in the last couple of years has regained his memories of this service, and he remembers the age regression process that he went through, and that this involved a cocktail of drugs. Now, because he's a chemical engineer, he is familiar with some of the principles behind this kind of technology, and so he's been reverse engineering, if you like, this cocktail. And so he is in the process of putting together the right combination of drugs that were used on him and others to age regress them 20 years for this secret space program. And he's hoping that in the next year or so, that he's going to be able to come up with that combination of drugs so that he can then make it open source information, so that people in the world can then start experimenting with this cocktail of drugs and start age regression themselves. So he's working on this now. He's developing a protocol for doing this, and what's really fascinating about this man is that not only is he someone who has been through the age regression process himself, where this cocktail is being used on him, but he's also being helped by Pleiadian extraterrestrials. Even now, he's still in communication with them. And they're helping him because he believes that this age regression technology is going to be one of the main ways in which the whole disclosure process can move forward. Because once this becomes commonly available as open source information, then the whole world is going to start recognizing that, you know, the stories of these Navy secret space program whistleblowers is actually based on fact.
It's It's about this recipe, and it needs to be cracked for the exact recipe to work for this age regression. Is there going to be some kind of patent or a secret recipe once major companies get involved? How are they going to keep this a secret or even get it to the public without any kind of suppression?
Well, I think what's really important here with this person who's actually working on reverse engineering this drug cocktail is that he's developing the right combination. He's looking at what was used on him, and he's being given guidance. He says that he's in telepathic communications with the Pleiadians that actually he was meeting with during his secret space program with the Navy. So he served on a Pleiadian mothership that was part of this agreement that the Navy had reached with the Pleiadians to kind of share information, to pool resources, so that in the future, when humanity was ready for all of this to be revealed, there would be people that would be knowledgeable about these advanced technologies. And so this age regression technology is one of the things that he believes that he can provide expertise on. So he's getting ready for that. He's going to do it in a way where he's going to make it open source. And the benefits of that is that by making it open source, I mean, he's not going to be liable to kind of like litigation or lawsuits or anything like that by people who try whatever cocktail of drugs he recommends. Because it's all going to be open source, and it's like, well, this is what worked on me and it can work on you, and people will try it and at their own risk. But I think what will happen is that whatever cocktail he produces, I think will be very likely will be effective and will knock off a few years of a person's life or age regress them.
So what you're actually saying is that he's going to create a recipe, this cocktail, and give it out in an open source way that the information is free for anybody to use.
That's exactly right. He's going to make it open source. Anyone can use it. This was a cocktail of drugs that was used in age regression on me. That'll be the approach he takes us, and it can work on you too. So he'll invite people to try it out. And so the thing is, this is the way to get the information out to as many people as possible. And that way, what I think will occur is that the pharmaceutical companies will then follow up and perfect the technique, come out with their own recommended cocktail, which will probably be more effective because they have the scientific resources in the laboratories to kind of fine-tune the cocktail, so that rather than knocking off, say, 5 years of your life, you could knock off 20 or 30 years. And I think this is why this kind of technology is not going to be suppressed, because the pharmaceutical companies will understand that they can make billions, even trillions of dollars of these kinds of age regression technologies using particular cocktails of commonly known drugs. Some of them can be very expensive, but nevertheless, this cocktail is something that I think is going to be part of the process of people awakening to the truth about secret space programs that utilize these kinds of advanced technologies regularly. Because at the end of the day, this has been going on since the 1970s. The Navy has been using this kind of cocktail of drugs to age regress people. So they've perfected it, so they know exactly how to knock off, say, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years off a person's life. So I think as this kind of information enters into the white world, there'll be kind of trial and error to begin with, but I think at the end of the day, age regression is going to be as real as just going to the doctors and having kind of like treatments for many common illnesses that people have.